Hi YouTube, it's Kathy and this is my May 2024 reading wrap-up. If you're not already aware, I do weekly entertainment wrap-ups of everything I read, watch, and listen to, but today we're just talking about the books. I'm going to start with my nerdy hardcore stats and charts and then get into what I read. Also, I put chapter markers in all of my videos, so if you need to skip over something, or if you need to go back to something, or if you're not really a big fan of the charts and you just want to get into the books, all of that is down below. On the way down to the description to check that out. If you could make sure that you're subscribed, that would be great. Maybe give this video a like, maybe even comment something. That would also be very nice of you. Also, as a reminder, I'm going to be updating my bookish bingo board from hell and my Read Queer All Year prompts at the end of the video, so stay tuned for that. In May, I read 18 things for a total of 5,615 pages. That takes into account converting audiobook minutes to pages, so 2,133 of those pages were actually about 72 hours of audio. The age breakdown for these books was 12 adult books, 5 YA books, and 1 middle grade book. I read 12 novels, 4 anthologies, and 2 graphic novels. This month, the biggest chunk of what I read was non-fiction and mystery thriller, followed by contemporary, historical fiction, fantasy, poetry, and horror. If you adjust by page count, not much changes. Most of these books were from the library, but I also read 2 of my Book of the Month books, 1 from a publisher, and 1 on Kindle. I read 7 hardcovers, 7 audiobooks, 2 ebooks, and 2 paperbacks. The biggest chunk of my books were in the 300 to 399 page range, and most of them were published this decade. Half of my reads were from female authors, with a good chunk from non-binary authors, and my protagonists, where applicable, were a mixed bag. In terms of setting, over half were in the USA, but I also had books from Canada, the UK, France, Ireland, Sweden, and other worlds. In terms of diversity of subject matter, there was about a quarter that didn't qualify, but I had a chunk of queer books, some to do with mental health and race, some intersectional books, and one that may have been translated given the authors are from Sweden, but I couldn't actually find that out definitively. In terms of star ratings, this month I had 3 3-star reads, 3 3.5-star reads, 4 4-star reads, 7 4.5-star reads, and 1 5-star read. Let's start with our lowest rated read and work our way up to our highest, shall we? Starting out with my 3 stars, we first have the second in a series, and that's Foxglove. This is the follow-up to... What the fuck was this the follow-up to? This is the follow-up to Belladonna. The next one will be called Wisteria. And I remember liking the first book well enough when I read it in January, and then by the time I got around to reading this, I had kind of forgotten all the names of the applicable people, so going through this without any form of like summary at the beginning to be like, this is what happened in the last book, was not great, because I kept going, who is this person? How are they related to what's going on? And I had to remember what actually happened last time, and eventually I got to the point where I just kind of didn't really care. I listened to this one as an audiobook, like I listened to the first one, and I just kept letting it go. I was just like, sure, I'll just keep listening. I'm sure that some of these things are going to be important at some point. And as it went on, I did remember more things that happened, so what was happening currently seemed a little bit more applicable. And I was really delighted to tell my friend Rachel when she said that she planned on reading this second book that, yeah, there's another ridiculous love triangle, so have fun with that. A new one. A new love triangle, because there was sort of one in the first book, and now there's a new one out of nowhere in the second book. Obviously, being the second book in a series, I can't really tell you too much, but the first one is about this girl who should have died when a bunch of people died at this big party because there was belladonna and everything, and she didn't die, and now she's had this whole thing going with death. She can see ghosts, death can see her, sometimes they talk, there's a mystery involved, she has to solve it, and that's pretty much what happens in this one too, with some more complications. My second 3-star read is The Joy of Movement. I read this one at the beginning of the month, and I thought I had actually read this like months ago, so it was really weird to look at my spreadsheet and be like, oh, that was since I got back. I thought I read it before I went to Europe. This one is exactly what you probably think it is. It's all about this person talking about like the joy of actually getting out and moving your body and all of those types of things. And it was fine. It talked about a few different things here and there. It brought up a few different case studies of different people and what kind of sports they're into and those types of things. It was okay. It was actually recommended by Olive over at A Book Olive, and I picked it up for that reason because I really like her taste, and it was fine. Next we have You, Me, and Bad Movies. This is all about an agender character who has been trading notes with somebody in their school library, and they really want to know who this person is because about 3 months previously they had a horrible breakup with a boyfriend, and they were kind of like, I'm not going to date anymore, but now they're really seeming really interested in this person, and we meet them at the point where they're basically leaving a note saying, hey, we should meet up in person, and it doesn't exactly go the way that they want. One of the ways they've really bonded is over bad movies, so they'll trade recommendations back and forth, they'll watch them, they'll talk about them in these notes. It was cute and fun contemporary fluff. I really enjoyed seeing how these characters eventually got to know each other and why the reasons why they weren't going to originally see each other and all of those types of things. All of that was kind of fun, and I could really see the motivations behind certain characters and why they were doing certain things. That being said, when I finished it, I didn't know if it was going to be super memorable for me, which is probably why it landed about here in this list. Something you need to know about my star ratings is I don't take them too seriously. I kind of assign something a star rating after I finished reading it, and that kind of basically just helps me rank them in these videos. If it wasn't for trying to rank them for these videos, I might not actually give things star ratings, but I like to have a format, so here we are. And I'm saying that because the first 3.5 star read on this list is Good Half Gone. And I read this again near the beginning of the month, and it's even less memorable in my mind than You, Me, and Bad Movies is. So it's funny that I was just talking about how I didn't think it was going to be memorable, and now I'm like, do I remember what happened in this one? I remember that there were twins. I remember that one of the twins died. I remember it was a thriller. Yeah, standing here, can't tell you much more than that. I think that around this time I was reading a lot of things and watching a lot of things that just happened to do with twins, which was interesting. But just standing here trying to tell you what this book was, I don't think I can. So take that as you will. My next 3.5 star read is She Started It. This is about primarily 4 characters, it's really about 5 characters, but these 4 characters who are all really good friends throughout school, and they were all particularly bullying this one character. Now it's about 10 years later, and that one character has sent them all invitations to this bachelorette party that she's hosting in the Caribbean on a private island because she wants them to be her bridesmaids. And they're all like, we haven't seen her in 10 years, this is weird, but also this is all expenses paid, and sure. They've got the accommodation paid for, all of the food and the beverage is gonna be paid for, and they're getting their first class flights paid for, and it's coming from the UK, so it's not like that's a short flight. So they're all like, sure, haven't seen her in a decade, but might as well go to this. And as the plot progresses, we kind of learn about the different things that these people did to her, and kind of the grudges that may or may not be happening. And of course now they're all on this secluded island by themselves, which is half an hour away or more by boat from any other island, so you can guess that it doesn't go well for these people. What I can say about this is what I really enjoyed about this is these were absolutely despicable people, and I was so glad that it was kind of pointed out that you're supposed to think that they're terrible people, because they really, really were. And it was written in such a way where I figured out what the twist was going to be, but I still wanted to know how we were going to get to that reveal, and I wanted to know what happened a decade plus ago. So if you don't take things like reveals too seriously, and if you're okay with maybe figuring it out ahead of time but still wanting to know other details, sure, this is a good one for that. Next we have The Road to Heaven, which is billed as a maple noir because it's set in the 60s in Toronto, and it's basically a noir book. But it's Canadian, so maple noir. If that makes no sense to you, we have a lot of maple trees in this country, and also the maple leaf is literally one of our sports teams as well as on our national flag. In any case, this is about this detective who up until this point has mostly been working some divorce cases where he basically tries to get people to go to bed, and then he takes pictures of them and gives them to their spouses and that type of thing. But as he wakes up the next day after doing one of those cases, now he's got a 16-year-old girl he needs to find. And as this case goes on, really quickly, I might add, because I think this takes place over 2 or 3 days, he finds some other mysteries that he feels like he needs to unravel, because if there's a mystery, he just kind of wants to solve it. He kind of wants to know what's going to happen. This one had some wild circumstances, and just trying to figure out exactly what was going to go down was not something that my brain was going ahead and doing. It was just not going to do that, and I'm perfectly fine with that. However, the writing in this was just not my favorite. Really early on there was a phrase that completely threw me off, which I think was squared archway, which makes no sense. And then some of the writing later was just like too wordy for what it was, and then there was a whole scene where these characters are having this conversation but they're having it while they're naked, and I'm just like, no, this is like, you just made this undressing thing to like make this more interesting or whatever, and really like, I either want to know the story or I want to know they had sex. I don't want them to do it at the same time. This is a debut and it is the first in a series, so I enjoyed it enough that I would be interested to see what's up next for this character, but this just came out and the second book is currently being written, so who knows when that'll happen. On to my 4-star reads, the first one being the book that I finished last night, which was Everything the Darkness Eats. This one is a horror novel and I knew nothing about it going into it. I possibly knew there were queer characters and that's probably why I put a hold on it at the library, but it's another one of those things where somebody told me about it, I requested it as an audiobook, got it as an audiobook, but knew nothing about it. This one is told from several different points of view, and it's one of those books where all of these different characters that you've met separately eventually come together, which is something I really enjoy. However, this one is really about this town that has a problem with, shall we say, homophobia. If you have any triggers that have to do with homophobia or any form of type of assault, or even religious trauma, I would say, actually, look up the triggers before going into this one, because yeah, some very messed up things happen. It being horror, that's kind of expected, but also knowing what you can handle and what you can't is good. And like 80 or 90% of the way through this, I was really enjoying just kind of seeing what was happening with these people and this kind of creepy thing where this guy was just kind of collecting people, bringing them back to his mansion, and then something was happening there, but we didn't really know what for a very long time. And I also really liked getting to know these backstories of these other different people, and it was remarkable how much we were actually able to get, considering this book was only about 5.5 hours long as an audiobook. The thing that makes me not think this was a wonderful book is there's a literal deus ex machina at the end, and I didn't understand how it made any sense. I understood we put a couple of building blocks in there to get to a point where that could happen, but then I just don't understand how these characters are gonna go on with their lives. Yeah, if you read this book, please talk to me about it in the comments. Next we have the poetry I read this month, which was How the Boogeyman Became a Poet. This is a memoir in verse by a queer black man about his understanding of growing up through high school and his first little time in college, kind of coming into his sexuality and what that means for him. This is billed as being for young adults. It's written in a very accessible way, and something I really enjoyed about this is inside the narrative of his conversations of what this was like growing up like this, he also had inserts of poems he was actually writing at the time. And sometimes you would actually get to see them on the page. Like he literally had loose leaf papers from when he wrote these and that was put into the book, which I thought was really interesting. Especially because I imagine if you were listening to this as an audiobook, that would be a wonderful circumstance, but also being able to see this mixed media was also very nice. So I can imagine both ways of consuming this are very nice, although I haven't listened to the audiobook if one even exists. If you're thinking that this is an experience that would resonate with you personally, or you want to open your mind to other people's experiences, this is definitely one I would recommend. I'm getting so sweaty. Next we have one of the graphic novels that I read this month, and that was Liberated, The Radical Art and Life of Claude Cahun. I still have no idea if I'm saying that name right. I really should have looked it up. C-A-H-U-N. Cahun? 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 The weird thing is I don't feel that badly about it because Claude Cahun is actually a pen name or an artist name for the main character of this book, who has a completely different name in their day-to-day life. Can I remember it right now? No, I can't. Do I do notes for these types of things? No, only for the statistics, not for actually what I'm going to say. I read this graphic novel because it's actually written by somebody who I follow on YouTube, which is Kaz Rowe, and they talked about it at the end of one of their videos, and I was like, oh, they have a graphic novel. I should read that if my library has it. My library had it, I got it, and then I found out a bunch of this graphic novel takes place in France and Jersey. 2 places I've been this year. So it kind of would have been cool to know about this historical figure before I went to those places. But either way, it was fun to reflect on this and be like, hey, I was just in that location. And yeah, seeing that the Second World War is still very much talked about in those locations made this all the more interesting to me. This is all about this person who was a performance artist and their life, and I really enjoyed it. It's hella queer, and while these 2 characters were living on Jersey, that's when it was occupied during the Second World War, and they were actually writing notes to the soldiers pretending to be another soldier saying that they should end the war, and they were actually caught, tried for this, and sentenced to be executed, but that's not where the story ends. So if you're intrigued, definitely pick it up. This month I also listened to The Woman in Me, which is the Britney Spears memoir that came out, and wow, she went through a lot, which I think we all collectively sort of knew because her life has been very public, but there was even more that we didn't know about. So I learned more things about her. I'm not really a huge follower of many celebrities and musicians and that type of thing. However, undoubtedly, I'm pretty sure most of us know who Britney Spears is. So I thought it was really interesting to go in and see what her life was like under conservatorship, and things that happened before that are also super messed up. And I thought that this was just very interesting because she has lived a life that is nothing like the one I'm living. On my 4.5 star reads, the first one being the second graphic novel that I'm talking about in this wrap up, and that's Puzzled. This is by Pan Cook, who is an illustrator that I found on Instagram. And then when I realized that he had a book coming out, I was like, sure, I will read that. And it turns out that this one is a memoir of his time growing up in Ireland and eventually realizing that he has OCD. Something I found out at the end of this is it takes on average 11 years before somebody with OCD actually talks to somebody about it and maybe gets diagnosed eventually, which I did not know. And because the majority of the schools in Ireland are Catholic run, that probably didn't really help, because a lot of the way that Pan's OCD manifested was him thinking that a literal demon was talking to him sometimes, and if he didn't do certain things, things were going to go badly for friends or family or whatever that may be. And obviously that's a lot of pressure to put on a person who has been told certain things by the church. I thought this was interesting and informative. Next we have Listen for the Lie, which is the other Book of the Month book I managed to read this month, and this one is all about this woman who 5 years ago stumbled out of the forest covered in her best friend's blood, and everybody thinks that she killed her best friend because her best friend was found dead. However, she's never been tried for it, and she actually has no idea because her memory of that night is completely wiped out. As we meet her, she is sitting down at her job and they are trying to very gently let her go because somebody just started a true crime podcast about the case, and they've basically been like, we can't really have you working here. And when she goes home, her boyfriend won't say anything, but you can tell he's side-eyeing her like, is this woman going to murder me? So when her grandmother is like, hey, can you come back for my birthday? It's coming up, and I think she was turning 80 or 85, one of those big birthdays, and she's like, I haven't been back since that whole circumstance happened 5 years ago, but sure, why not? I'll come back for your birthday. And while she's there, she meets the true crime podcaster and actually starts working with him to figure out whether or not she killed her best friend. Now, I will say there are certain things about this that are very unethical from a journalism standpoint, and I did not enjoy those parts of it because I do consume a fair amount of true crime, but I try to consume true crime from creators that I feel are ethical and are not telling it just to be salacious or whatever, but are actually trying to get the word out there about certain different topics and things and cases and that type of thing. I'm sure there's lots that can be said on this topic, but there were things happening in this book that if they were happening in something I was consuming that was true crime, I would not support that creator. So there's that. I thought this was really interesting, especially having that true situation where she literally didn't know, but if she did it, she wants to know. Next, I listened to Moby Dyke. This is all about this woman who is going around to all of the lesbian bars left in America, which at that point was about 20, and basically telling you about them. I thought this was a really interesting premise. I really liked learning about these different locations and how she was treated based on whether or not she went by herself or with her partner, and her kind of having these ideas of how certain things were going to be and whether or not that was actually the case. There's also a lot of overlap between these different spaces and different themes you would see throughout them, which I found very interesting. And I also had to laugh at one point because I was listening to this one day while going to the library, and I had to stop and send my best friend a voice note because she is in this bar in Seattle and she just stumbles upon this meetup for this Facebook group called the PNW Lesbians, Pacific Northwest Lesbians, and both my best friend and I happen to be part of that Facebook group, although we've never been to these because it is very US centric. I'm sure there's meetups in Canada, but like I've never been to one. It was an interesting project and I like seeing her reflect on these different locations. Next we have Notes on an Execution. This one is told in a very interesting format because on the one hand we have these different women who are in the life or were in the life of this one man, and we're kind of seeing their lives and their backstories and how they relate to him. And then when we're from his perspective, it's counting down by the hour to the time where he's going to be executed for the crimes he committed. What I enjoyed about this is it jumped around a little bit in the timeline, so we got to see his mom as our first perspective, which I thought was really interesting, and that kind of led into what his tragic backstory is. And we got to see this woman who's actually the twin sister of a woman that ends up marrying him, so that's where twins were following me around at one point this month. And then in the present, he's definitely scheming because he does not want to die that day. It was definitely interesting, and it was told in a very captivating way. Something else that I found incredibly captivating Evading was an immense world. I've read one other book by this author before, and that was I Contain Multitudes, and everything I liked about that book was also present in this book. We have this wonder about the world and how there are so many different senses, so many that we don't even know how to classify them, and whether or not the senses of one animal is comparable to the senses of another animal. This is one of those books where you're going to learn some really random, interesting facts about different animals that you're going to be able to tell people, and the one that I always remember from I Contain Multitudes, which I read years ago, is the fact that there's a parasite that lives in the eyeballs of certain fish, and I believe in order for them to reproduce, they actually have to be in the stomach of a bird. So when they're ready for that situation to happen, they actually tell the fish somehow that it needs to go closer to the surface, so the fish will actually be eaten by the bird, and then they can reproduce. And that's just super weird, and it stuck with me all this time. And I'm probably not getting the science completely correct, which I never will. There's also a bunch of stuff I learned in this that I will not get that science correct either. However, super interesting. He's also a fan of a pun and also a fan of just like referencing things, but not like telling you that he's referencing the thing. So if you get these different little turns of phrase from him, that you'll be like, ah yes, I know exactly what you're talking about, or what you just quoted, completely randomly, because he won't comment on it any further than that. He'll just continue on, which is something I really enjoy about his writing. Also, he reads the audiobook himself, which I always appreciate. Another nonfiction book I read this month is Factfulness, and the subtitle of this one basically has to do with like 10 reasons why you think the world is really, really bad, but it's actually not that bad. That's not exactly what it is. I didn't write it down. I could look it up. It's fine. It's on the screen right now. It's literally on the cover. You can look it up yourself. This is all about how our brains interpret data that we're given and why we're given data in the way that we're given, and how the vast majority of people actually think the world is doing worse than it actually is. Two things can be true at the same time. Bad things can be happening, and the world can be getting better. And just because there's one doesn't mean there's not the other. This one was published in 2018, so some of the data is definitely out of date, which will happen with anything like this. But one of the things that I found really interesting is there was a section where he talked about there are 5 main things that I'm really concerned about happening in the world one day, and the first one was a global pandemic. So yeah, that happened, and I'm sure he would have things to say about it if he didn't pass away, I believe in 2018 or late 2017, one of the two. This book just gave me a lot of hope for the world, and I thank it for that. Penultimately, we have the no girlfriend rule. I just really enjoyed this one. This one is all about our main character who is actually dating her best friend. They've been best friends all throughout school, and it got to the point where people just started making fun of them, being like, I bet you guys are dating, so they decided to actually be dating. But one thing in his life that she really wants to get into is his weekly game of secrets and sorcery with the guys. However, the guys have a no girlfriend rule, so basically they're secret keepers, like nobody can invite their girlfriend to play in our game, and she actually would really like to be in the game, so she's trying to find her own campaign so she can get all of this knowledge about the game and strengthen her point of being allowed to actually play with the guys. Secrets and Sorcery, by the way, is very much like Dungeons and Dragons, but what I really enjoyed about this book is it made up its own lore about this tabletop role-playing game that is definitely based on Dungeons and Dragons, but because it's not the same game, people can't nitpick about different game mechanics and that type of stuff from this book, which I thought was very smart. Hollis, our main character, ends up going to a campaign at basically a game shop, and it doesn't go well. There's kind of a creepy person, and she's not really enjoying the experience. But as she's leaving that, she sees this poster for somebody saying, hey, we're starting a new campaign soon. If anyone's interested, please just send me an email. And she's just missed the cutoff date, but she sends an email anyway and is accepted and meets this whole group of girls who love playing Secrets and Sorcery. And this group is definitely shit on by the guys who are playing their own Friday night Secrets and Sorcery game. This one is queer and nerdy and fun and full of fandom, and our main character is an illustrator, so she's actually drawing people's characters at different points, and I'm just like, I would love to see what these actually look like, because I can picture them in my head, but like, I want to see her art. I would actually follow her Instagram if it existed in real life. I think my elbow just clicked. That was weird. This was just nerdy and fun and cute and queer, and I liked it. On to my final book of the month, the only one that I gave 5 stars, and that is The House of Eve. This is another one of those books where somebody told me about it, I put a hold on it, I listened to it, but I didn't know anything about it going into it, besides it was historical fiction and it centered Black women. This one is told in alternating chapters between 2 different characters, and for a very long time I had no idea how these characters were connected, whether or not they were ever going to meet, but I was really interested in what was going on in each of their lives. One of them, I believe, lived in Philadelphia. She was about 15 15 years old. She's really trying to make it in this program that she's taking through her school so that she can be the first in her family to go to college, but she's had some drawbacks because her family life is a little bit unstable and there's some problems with that. Our other character has a mother who took on a second job so she could actually go to college, and she's at college and she's studying really, really hard, but she's also working in the campus library at the same time, so she does not have a lot of free time. But she meets this guy that she's been eyeing up in the library for a really long time, and things go from there. Part of me is like, you should go into this like I did and not know anything about it and just read it and find out what happened. However, even though I don't usually give specific trigger warnings because I am always afraid I'm going to miss one out and I don't want to be the only person that you look at for trigger warnings for anything, which is why I have resources down in the description for that, I will have to point out that if you have any triggers to do with pregnancy, miscarriage, children, abuse, look into the trigger warnings in full for this before going into it. From there, you might be able to figure out how these characters are connected, but it took me until just before I was going to figure out how they were connected for that to be a whole thing for me. Regardless, this is fantastic historical fiction. I really enjoyed the author's note at the end talking about how this kind of came to be as a subject that she wanted to talk about, and it's just really good. If it sounds like something you would be interested in, I definitely recommend it. As for May's Read Queer All Year prompts, these were them, and I was able to mark off 3 out of 4 of them. The one I'm not specifically marking off is the one that says books against phobias, and it's really weird to me because the kind of queer books that I read definitely talk against phobias, but I didn't read a book that was specifically about being against phobias, if that makes any sense, so that's the only reason I haven't marked that one off. I was able to cover pan representation and agender representation with You, Me, and Bad Movies, because our main character is both pansexual and agender. And I was able to cover mental health with the No Girlfriend Rule, which I really should have talked about while I was talking about that book, but our main character has anxiety, takes medication for that. There's a secondary character that has depression, takes medication for that. So it's definitely something that comes up. There's definitely a panic attack that happens at one point. It's definitely something I should have talked about when I was talking about it, but I don't always remember everything I want to talk about when I'm just going off the cuff. As for my bookish bingo board from hell, it now looks like this. And the things that changed for this month is I read 2 more Book of the Month books now that I'm back home and I can read my physical library again. I also got 2 more on the 400+ page books, which were Foxglove and An Immense World, which means I've actually checked off this square. I have 10 things for this, which means I have checked off my first bingo square, which is really, really cool. All of my other squares don't have any difference, which means that I'm gonna have to work pretty hard if I want to get an actual bingo instead of just checking off 1 box in the entire year, but I have 7 more months. I have time. I'm also wavering on this one, so please let me know down below what you think I should do. But Factfulness is written by people from Sweden. However, it's possible that it was written in English, like it was first published in English. So I feel weird putting it under non-English speaking countries, which is the international square on this, but it is international and there is a chance that it was translated, so I should probably put it on there, but I just haven't. Because I'm one of those people that where I don't really want to fudge all of my numbers, but I feel like it counts. It counts, right? Somebody tell me it counts. And if you do tell me it counts, I will update it for next month. If you want to hear me talk more about these books or other books for that matter, the playlist for my weekly entertainment wrap-ups is always linked down below. I'm getting really, really close to 400 videos, which means 400 weeks in a row for that series, which I'm really proud about. If you've read any of these or you now want to read any of these, let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. If you don't feel like leaving a comment but want to make sure that I know you're here, just leave me an emoji or a smiley face if you happen to be on your keyboard. Some people have asked if there's a way to financially support this channel, so I set up a Ko-fi account, which is a digital tipping service. The link for that, as always, is down below. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye!